Today's video is going to give you 4 steps that you can take to relieve the source of your lower back pain. And that does include if your lower back is the source of injury, giving you sciatica as well. So things like slip discs, bulging discs, etc., injuries to that lower lumbar spine that might well not just give you lower back pain itself, but actually pain into the hip, down the leg, and into the foot as well. We're going to have timestamps underneath this video so it can be as helpful as possible. You can skip to the relevant parts of the video for you. And finally, just know that each one of these 4 steps is addressing a different part of the underlying problem to relieve that particular nuanced strain. So you don't want to miss out any of them. You want to make sure you're doing all 4 of them together or simultaneously. First and foremost, we want to identify and draw out the difference between a lower back pain relieving routine and a lower back injury relieving routine. This is obviously going to be the latter. Now, the former, pain relieving, this could be drinking alcohol. It could be taking prescription medications. It could be knee hugs. It's fundamentally routines, activities, medications that are trying to alleviate the pain. And quite often, in fact, in most cases, these are not doing anything for the underlying problem in improving healing or strains that are on the tissues that build up from day in, day out life. Yes, we want to alleviate the pain. However, if we focus more on alleviating the stress on the tissues, we will find that we have more compounding success and results actually dealing with the pain at the same time as dealing with the injury. People all too often fall into the trap of just doing these pain relieving activities like taking painkillers or other activities like knee hugs, which are not addressing the underlying problem. They're not helping the underlying tissues heal or take strain off those tissues effectively. And therefore they end up going round and round in circles, doing them for extended periods of time without actually getting any results. And quite often, I know the viewers that watch our YouTube videos fall into this trap or initially come across our videos because they've fallen into this trap themselves. I'd also like to draw to your attention the comparison or similarities between this particular routine and its necessity with other activities. For example, if you are an athlete, a trainer, working out hard in the gym, maybe some sort of sporting pursuit, or you're just lifting weights in a competitive manner, you're going to find that you're putting your body under strain. You're putting tissues under strain, and they are going to be trying to adapt. And there are things you can do, be it nutritional, be it activities, be it post-exercise, things that we can do to enhance the recovery process by addressing the fact that those tissues are strained, focusing on that as a primary mode of helping improve adaptation in those tissues. And that's fundamentally what we're trying to do here with this routine. We're trying to focus on the strain of daily life that is being put on these tissues that is preventing them from recovering effectively or making that recovery less smooth and less complete. So even if we've got lower back pain and we're not doing much every day, we are doing something. Maybe we're just struggling to get around the house, or maybe we are forcing ourselves to go to work, or maybe we are, having to look after the kids and getting down on the floor and doing things that put strain on the lower back injury. And this specific routine is going to be alleviating that strain rather than, or as well as, just addressing the actual pain that is caused by doing those activities. Very, very important that you get this into your head as an understanding from a conceptual point of view so that the routine can be as helpful as possible, and also so you can perhaps start to reevaluate some of the things that you might be doing to alleviate pain on a daily basis that are counterproductive and making you fundamentally worse, or at least impairing your healing process. Remember, as with all of our videos, if you've got any questions, you're watching this, you're thinking, hey, I don't know about that, I'm not quite sure, what about this? Always use that comment section below because we read and reply to every single one of your comments. Enough on the background, let's get into the nitty-gritty of this. Number 1 is going to be focusing on removing erroneous movements in this lumbar spine. When we have an injury down here in the lower back, it is random movements from daily living that put strain focused on an area that's maybe not healing very well. Let's say it's something that's causing you hip pain or sciatic pain, and it's coming from this L4-5 or L5-S1 region. That region is injured, and therefore it's not got the same integrity that other regions of your spine will have. And therefore, if we have erroneous movements happening here, when we're moving around, the examples that I mentioned earlier, in the house, at work, etc., those are going to put strain on those tissues that are trying to go through a healing process. So first and foremost, we want to start to learn to engage our core to be able to brace and protect that region first, because that is going to reduce the likelihood of those daily stresses and strains injuring and flaring up our lower back. It's all well and good doing other things, but if we can't proactively start to brace and stabilize that lower lumbar section that is injured and provide it that extra little bit of support, we're going to be going round and round in circles, because we're constantly going to be finding that simple little activities cause strain to be focused on that injured tissue in the lower lumbar spine, be it a disc, be it some other ligamentous structures, be it some of the other structures in the area. And that is going to make flare-ups a frequent occurrence, often in ways that we didn't really anticipate. We don't know why it's happened, but it's those small erroneous movements happening that are straining and re-aggravating those tissues. You will be doing every day movements around the house, even if you're in very, very significant pain. By being able to control your lumbar spine and protect it, you will do much better. A little side note here is don't fall into the trap of trying to use external support such as belts, etc. to provide that stability. That's a one-way trip to a lot of trouble. It's not going to help you, and we've got videos, maybe we'll link to one in the description of this particular video, on the specific reasons as to why those belts do not work, and actually arguably, especially if it's L45 and L5S1 that your injury is located at, they will make you worse. One little tip for that particular first point is doing exercises that involve tucking the pelvis. So for example, a pelvic tuck like so, where we flatten the lumbar lordosis, would be a wrong exercise to do. That is very important that we are focusing on maintaining a neutral spine. So engaging muscles like the transverse abdominis that provide cylindrical and complete control and protection for this lumbar spine, rather than hooking in movements of flexion and extension through the lumbar spine. That will get you into bad habits again, and it's pre-straining the lumbar spine in a way that is not advantageous if we have a lower lumbar injury. Step number 2 is removing the requirement for extra movement in the lumbar spine by way of mobilizing the hips safely. Now, once we've done number 1, I learned to stabilize our lumbar spine, we can actually start to work on mobilizing the hips. The hips are really important. They're very strong, stable joints. They've got a nice deep ball and socket with very strong muscles like the glutes that can work around them. But unfortunately, in a lot of cases, if not all cases of lower back pain, there's going to be some degree of spastic contraction, a degree of residual tightness taking place in those hip muscles, things like the hamstrings and the glutes, etc. They are going to restrict the range of motion in those hips, which means that when you're doing any sort of movements, whether it's putting your clothes on in the morning, whether it's moving around the house, whether it's just sitting in a simple chair, if those hips are really tight or tighter than they would like to be, you're going to find that that means that when you're sitting, for example, your hip will not come into as much flexion, i.e. the thigh coming up to 90 degrees. Instead of coming up that far, it'll come up to about here, and your lower back will have to round. If we haven't learned how to stabilize the lumbar spine and prevent that unwanted movement, then we're not going to be able to effectively open out the hips, really, because we'll find that we're just not able, whenever we do, for example, a hamstring stretch, we just end up rounding our lower back. So you have to first learn to stabilize the lumbar spine, then start working on the hip mobility. And it's a good point to pause for the moment here and just explain or point out, you are going to have to do these things regularly. You're going to do some stretching of your hamstrings. Stretching works. It increases the mobility of the hips. That's great. But then you're going to carry on doing things on a daily basis that are putting strain back on the tissues. Some of those can be avoided, silly things, of course. But the reality of life is that you're load bearing, and you're having to load bear on an injured tissue. So you will have to do this routine on a regular basis. And just to pause, there are other things that we should be doing in tandem with this, but this is an essential part, an essential relief-based routine that is going to help you in the process of rehabilitating and strengthening everything correctly. And we will get into a little bit more on that a little bit later in the video, so don't worry if you've got questions right now. And if you do, again, comment section below. Thirdly, we're going to be relieving strain on the discs and the lordosis. And what I mean by that is the compressive load of being an upright human being operating in the world is going to put strain on those discs. And in many cases, because we're perhaps going to be sitting down a little bit more, unfortunately, because we don't want to stand up, we might find that our lower back is having the habit of flattening itself out and becoming rounded like so. Both of those are undesirable strains on the lumbar spine. By using the towel to support the lumbar spine effectively, by providing both a lordotic support like so, and by creating a little bit of unloading, axial unloading of the spine and the discs, you're going to alleviate that strain of gravity and that strain of loss of lordosis that is happening in all of us on a daily basis. Even me, as I'm sat right down here, anytime I move back, there's a little bit of lordosis flattening happening in the lumbar spine. We want to work to oppose this on a regular basis to give that relief of that particular strain that's happening in our lumbar spine. And again, it's worth mentioning, Later on in this video, we're going to give you a little link on how to do all of these exercises as well. So please don't worry about that if you've still got some questions on, hey, you're talking about these things I've got to do, but how the hell am I going to do them? This video, we really wanted to take the time to explain specifically what you need to do and why you need to do it and how it's working in your body, because we have another video that we'll link to in the YouTube channel that will help you with regards to how to do these and literally follow along with us doing every single exercise. The fourth and final point is going to really hone in on here, because a lot of people don't necessarily realize this. But in many cases, you might have had, say, an MRI scan, say, hey, the disc's bulged, but it's not actually pressing on the nerve, but you've still got back pain. Quite often, it's the inflammatory buildup in these small little holes. And you can see here, we've got a little disc bulge, but the nerve's coming out. If we have a little disc bulge and we aggravate or exacerbate this injury down here where it's trying to heal, then that's going to create inflammation. Inflammation is going to build up in this finite bony canal. We only have so much space in here. Yes, we can move to change things, and we've got other videos that talk about that and the pitfalls that sometimes come with that. But this is a finite space, so we want to be able to have a strategy for just manipulating any excess inflammation that might well build up in that area. And that's where we're using ice. And we're using ice regularly over this section, but not for periods longer than sort of 3 to 5 minutes. Quite often people say, okay, ice, I'll go and do 20 minutes. No, that's not what we've found works best for people. 3 to 5 minutes directly over the spine, not necessarily where the pain is, because sometimes there's that referral pain and it's not in the same spot. Sciatica being an obvious example here. You might have pain in the hamstring. Well, putting the ice over the hamstring is going to do absolutely nothing for the inflammation that's building up in the lower lumbar spine. So we have to remember that and understand that. Again, this is why we go through these videos that are a little bit more talky, but help you hopefully understand so you don't make silly mistakes, because so many people do. So in this particular example, we are relieving the strain of buildup in inflammation, because once inflammation in those confined little holes reaches a critical mass, it's going to start to irritate the nerves and your symptoms are going to come on. And that would be typically when you might choose to do something like a knee hug to make the space, as you can hopefully see here, larger. It makes the hole larger when we do a knee hug. That has problems though for the underlying injury, because by doing that knee hug, we are going against principle number 3, which is support the lordosis and decompress the spine. You're actually doing exactly the opposite when you do that knee hug, which is why it's such a bad exercise for lower back pain, because it actually feels nice while you're doing it, but it is going to almost always be a problematic exercise and one that really should be completely left alone. To hopefully round this video off nicely, we've got these 4 key principles, key actions, key activities that we're going to be taking to relieve the stressors that are taking place on our lower back injury specifically. And by regularly doing those, we can regularly work up against the strains of daily life that are happening come what may. We cannot avoid these strains, but we can provide relief to the tissues in an effective, targeted way with very minimal, if not no, downsides compared to, as I mentioned just a moment ago, things like knee hugs. It starts to focus more on the problem rather than the symptoms that might be there. And by focusing on the problem, we find the symptoms start to take care of themselves. Now, I have mentioned in this video, we have to do other things. This routine itself is working against those daily activities that are inevitable, but we must be working on our strengthening as well. And there'll be a link up here or in the description where you can learn a little bit more about the Back in Shape program, but it is vital. This is what we call our phase 1 routine. And as I mentioned earlier on in this video, there's going to be a link down here to one of our YouTube videos that goes through the full routine. You can check it out right now or just after this video and follow along in real time so you know exactly how to do all of these exercises and all of the necessary training points along the way to make sure you're doing them correctly and aware of what you should and shouldn't be feeling in your body at the same time. But we have to do that in tandem with strengthening work. Because once you've learned how to, for example, in point number 1, engage your core effectively, we have to build strength there. Strength that can start to guard us against the future relapses that will inevitably take place. Strength that can allow us to move through life on a daily basis without injuring our lower back, without being vulnerable. And that process takes time. We're talking about getting the muscles in our body to make a change, to grow and adapt. And unfortunately, the time frame that takes is a little bit longer. And therefore, we need to have a relief-based routine that we can do along the way to manage things as we are building that strength, because it is only when we've built that strength to a sufficient level, and that's going to be different for each and every one of us, different for the quality of our lumbar spine. For example, if we've got a minor strain to some of the lower lumbar segments versus if we've got something like a spondylolisthesis or a raging disc bulge, there's going to be different requirements for extra strength. Or if we've got some degenerative change there, we're going to have different requirements to reach a certain level of strength. And while you're going through that process and your body is responding in kind, it is adapting, you need this sort of routine to help you along the way, alleviate the stresses and stressors that are going to be placed on that lumbar spine. One final little note is, as you go through that strengthening process, you are going to start putting load back on your back. You're going to have to start to stimulate those tissues to respond, to grow, to strengthen. Maybe it's the disc that was damaged, to lay down collagen on the back of this disc here, so that it can start to learn how to weight bear effectively again, and have an idea of how much strength it really needs to rebuild, how much collagen needs to be, where it needs to line up so it can reinforce the tensile strength, the load bearing strength of that lumbar spine. And that's going to involve some degree of load bearing through our resistance training at the right time, of course, not straight away, but at the right time. And that process, when you've got a relief routine like we've discussed today, you've got little opportunities after that hard work to just relieve the strain on the tissues. And that marrying up of a good relief routine with strength-based work is what works, and what we're finding works for so many of our members of the Back in Shape program. So I do hope this video has been really helpful. There's going to be some resources in the notes underneath here, and obviously I've mentioned some of the cards up in the top corner that can help you more specifically going forwards. I do hope it's been a really, really helpful video. Again, comment section down there if you've got any questions, any concerns, any queries, anything didn't quite make sense, or if you've tried these things, started doing this in the right way, and you're starting to notice things are working, that is absolutely awesome. Make sure you give us a thumbs up if you found this video useful. It is a little bit different to some of our other videos, and we want to know that all of these videos are really helping you in the best possible way. We've got some exercise and some talking head ones, and they all serve a different purpose, of course, and hopefully you guys appreciate that. Remember, you can subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with all our latest videos, as well as the Back in Shape podcast, where we cover in detail specific topics. And as always, see you in the next video, and have a great day.